Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. The vehicle surged through the atmosphere, the hum of the engines vibrating beneath Liam's feet. Outside the sleek, transparent windows, Earth became a mere blue and white marble in the distance, shrinking as they ascended toward the stars. Liam's hands were sweaty despite the calm he tried to project. He couldn't suppress the anxiety that gnawed at him. It was one thing to date Mara, but meeting her family, alien or not, was another entirely. As the ground disappeared below them, his mind raced with questions. What would they be like? Would they look like Mara? Or were they entirely different, like some of the bizarre creatures he'd seen on documentaries? What kind of customs did they have? What if they thought he was inferior? Mara seemed to sense his unease. She leaned in, her presence calming yet powerful. "You're doing great, Liam. Just breathe." He exhaled slowly, focusing on the rhythmic thrum of the vehicle beneath him. "I just didn't expect this," he admitted, finally breaking the silence. "I mean, a few weeks ago, I was just a guy in a coffee shop, and now I'm traveling off-planet to meet your, alien family. No big deal, right?" She laughed softly, her golden eyes sparkling with amusement. "You'd be surprised how many Earthlings would love to be in your position. The whole alien family thing is a huge deal. Trust me, it's not as scary as it sounds." Liam chuckled nervously. "I don't know. You've told me a lot about Caliph, but it's still hard to wrap my head around it. I've seen the stars, sure, but it's nothing like this. I can't even imagine living on a planet like yours." "You'll see soon enough," Mara said cryptically, her smile enigmatic. "Just keep an open mind." The vehicle continued its silent ascent, cutting through the clouds and reaching the edges of Earth's atmosphere. Liam glanced out the window, his breath caught in his chest. There was no turning back now. Soon, the stars began to shift, their constellations unfamiliar, swirling in a way that defied the logic he knew from his nights spent stargazing. A sense of wonder mixed with a deep, underlying fear. What if his ordinary life was about to be upended in a way he couldn't handle? "Where are we going, exactly?" Liam asked after several minutes of contemplative silence. Mara looked at him, her gaze softening. "We're heading to Calitha's moon, Telenis. It's a bit of a tradition, well, it was, before I left. Our family has always gathered there for important moments. It's peaceful, away from the city and distractions. Just, family." Liam nodded, trying to focus on the distant speck of light ahead. It was growing larger, and soon he could make out the silhouette of what looked like a small, crescent-shaped moon. Telenis, Mara had called it. From the way she spoke, it felt like it held a deep, personal meaning for her. A place of comfort and history. The vehicle's engines hummed with a soft, melodious vibration as they slowed, descending toward the moon's surface. Liam could see mountains in the distance, their jagged peaks silhouetted against a sky awash in purples and blues. It was nothing like Earth. There was no green, no oceans, no sprawling cities. Only vast, sweeping plains and barren craters dotted with strange, bioluminescent plants that shimmered in the moonlight. "Here we are," Mara said softly, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. The vehicle touched down gently on the soft surface, and the door opened with a soft hiss. The air was thin, but not uncomfortably so. It was cold, but not unbearable, and the chill of the air felt oddly refreshing against Liam's skin. He took a deep breath and followed Mara out of the vehicle, his boots crunching against the fine, silvery dust of Telenis. The moon's surface was dotted with towering structures, ancient-looking buildings that shimmered in a way that made them appear alive. Some looked like organic shapes, flowing like the curves of seashells, while others were sharp and crystalline, as though cut directly from the surface of the moon itself. Mara led him through a large archway, the design unfamiliar but strikingly beautiful, and they stepped into a vast, open courtyard. The air was cool but held a strange, otherworldly fragrance. Suddenly, a ripple passed through the courtyard, as though the space itself had shifted. From the shadows, a group of figures stepped forward, their forms illuminated by the pale, silvery light of the moon. Liam's breath caught in his throat. They looked like Mara, tall, regal, with skin that seemed to glow faintly in the low light, their eyes shimmering gold, but they were different. They were more imposing, more intense. Their features were sharp, almost otherworldly, and their presence radiated an energy that seemed to vibrate in the air. One of the figures, an older woman with silver hair flowing like a river, stepped forward with a graceful, fluid motion. Her golden eyes locked onto Liam, appraising him with an intensity that made his pulse race. "Mara," the woman said, her voice rich with authority and warmth, "you've brought him. Your Earthling." Liam swallowed hard, unsure of what to say or do. This was Mara's family, the beings she had spoken of, who had lived for centuries, whose minds could process information at speeds he could barely comprehend. He felt small in their presence, but there was something else in their gaze. Something he couldn't quite place. "Yes, Mother," Mara said, her voice steady. "This is Liam. The one I've told you about." "Welcome, Earthling," the woman said, her lips curving into a welcoming smile. "I am Shara, matriarch of our family. You've made quite an impression on our Mara. We've been curious to meet you." Liam offered a nervous smile, his heart pounding. Thanks. It's great to meet you, too." Mara squeezed his hand reassuringly, but Liam could sense the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a casual introduction. This was a test, one he wasn't sure he was ready for. Shara regarded him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Come, sit with us. There is much to discuss, and your presence here has already begun to shift things. We must understand the connection between you and our Mara." The group parted to make way for them, and Liam followed Mara into the center of the courtyard, where a long, circular table stood. The rest of Mara's family sat around it, their expressions unreadable, but Liam could feel their eyes on him, assessing, waiting. He sat next to Mara, the weight of their scrutiny never leaving him. As they began to speak, their voices resonated through the stillness, and Liam realized that this was only the beginning of an unfamiliar and dangerous journey. Liam's fingers tightened around the edges of his seat as the weight of Mara's family's gazes bore down on him. They all sat at the long, circular table, their golden eyes trained on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. There were at least 10 of them, all different in appearance but united by an undeniable, ethereal grace that seemed to pulse with their every movement. Tall and slender, their skin shimmered with the faint glow of distant stars, and their features were sharp, carved by centuries of existence. Mara sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. She gave him an encouraging smile, but even her serene expression couldn't fully mask the gravity of the moment. She, too, seemed to sense the tension, the weight of the history behind this gathering. This wasn't just a dinner with her family. It was a ritual, a critical moment where he would be judged, not just by Mara's standards, but by those of a species whose understanding of the universe stretched across countless light-years. Shara, the matriarch, spoke first. Her voice was deep, calm, and resonated through the air like the slow vibration of a tuning fork. "Liam," she began, her eyes never leaving his, "you are the first of your kind to join us at this table. The first human to step into the presence of Caliph. We have heard much of you." The word struck him like a punch to the chest. He'd known this moment would be monumental, but hearing it laid out so plainly made his nerves flare. I'm honored," he stammered, trying to muster the composure he'd learned from years of living in a fast-paced, human-dominated world. He couldn't be just the awkward earthling in this room. He had to be more. For Mara. Shara's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him, as though trying to peel back his thoughts. "You should be," she said, her tone unreadable. "But the question remains, do you understand what it means to be with one of us? Do you understand the bond that ties Mara and her family to the cosmos itself?" The weight of our existence. Our legacy. Liam felt the intensity of the question deep in his gut. No, he didn't fully understand. How could he? He was just a human, a man from a blue and green planet in a corner of the universe no one paid attention to. What could he offer Mara that matched the power and history of her people? Mara's hand squeezed his, as if sensing his turmoil. Her golden eyes flicked toward him, silently encouraging him to answer, to step up, to be the person she believed him to be. The room fell into silence. All eyes were on him, and for a long, disorienting moment, Liam was acutely aware of every detail. The smooth, luminescent surfaces of the room seemed to pulse with energy. The air itself felt charged. The very atmosphere hummed with the weight of time, a centuries-old presence that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations beyond human comprehension. Liam inhaled deeply. This was it. This was his chance to show them who he was. To show Mara's family that he wasn't just some human, he was the man who loved her. And that had to be enough. I don't understand everything about your people, Shara, Liam said, his voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty inside him. I don't know the history of Caliph, or the intricacies of your legacy, or what it means to be you. But I know what it means to love someone. I know what it feels like to care for someone deeply. And I care for Mara more than anything. Shara remained silent for a long moment, her gaze unyielding, as though weighing every word that left Liam's lips. Around the table, the rest of the family members remained still, their expressions unreadable. There was a quiet intensity in the air, a palpable anticipation as if they, too, were waiting for some unseen signal. Finally, Shara nodded. Love. Yes, that is the foundation. But love alone does not bind us to the stars. There are challenges ahead, Liam, challenges you cannot even begin to fathom. Liam felt his heart rate increase. Was that a warning? Did she think he couldn't handle it? You see, Earthlings, Shara continued, her voice lowering, becoming more solemn. Your species is young, fragile in the eyes of the universe. You have not yet grasped the full scope of what it means to be part of something much greater than your world. You are a species bound to your planet, your limited understanding of existence. Caliph, on the other hand, is bound to the fabric of the cosmos itself. We are bound to eternity. Liam's thoughts spun, trying to digest her words. He had always known that Mara was different. But now, hearing it from her family, the realization hit him with full force. He had no idea what he had stepped into. He was from a species that was still young, still evolving. And Mara. Mara was from a place that existed outside of human comprehension. What are you asking me to do? Liam asked, his voice tense, though he tried to keep the uncertainty at bay. What's the challenge? Shara's expression softened ever so slightly, and she raised a hand to indicate the rest of her family. We are not merely a family, Liam. We are a council. And we are bound to ensure that Mara's future is worthy of her legacy. If you are to be part of her life, if you are to claim your place beside her, you must prove yourself. Not just to her, but to all of us. You must demonstrate that you are worthy of the cosmos we represent. Of the history, the power, and the responsibility that comes with it. Liam's stomach churned. He wasn't sure what he was expected to do, he wasn't even sure if he could live up to whatever expectations they had. But there was one thing he did know with absolute certainty, he was willing to try. He was willing to fight for Mara. Tell me what I need to do, Liam said, the determination rising in his chest. I'm ready. Shara's gaze flicked briefly to Mara, who nodded, a silent reassurance in her eyes. Shara then turned her focus back to Liam, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of respect in her gaze. Very well, she said softly. We will begin with a simple trial. The trial of kinship. It will test your strength, your intelligence, and your willingness to sacrifice for Mara. If you succeed, you will earn the right to stand beside her. Fail, and you will be sent back to your Earth, forgotten, as if you never existed. Liam swallowed hard. The stakes were high. But he wasn't about to back down. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the air around them felt charged, as though the universe itself was watching. Mara's hand squeezed his once again, her voice low and comforting. Whatever happens, Liam. I believe in you. Liam nodded, determination burning in his chest. I'll prove I'm worthy of you, Mara. I'll do whatever it takes. And so, as the trial loomed ahead, the future of their relationship, and of his place among her people, hung in the balance. The courtyard was silent as Shera's words echoed in the air. The trial of kinship. A test of strength, intelligence, and sacrifice. A rite that had been reserved for those who sought to join the ranks of Kalitha's closest. Liam's mind swirled with the implications of it all. Could he even pass such a trial? Was he truly prepared to face whatever challenge lay ahead? Mara squeezed his hand again, her touch grounding him in the moment. She was unwavering in her belief that he could succeed, and that faith was the only thing that kept him from falling apart. He had to do this, not just for Mara, but for himself, for the love they shared. The family around the table exchanged quiet words among themselves, their voices soft and rhythmic, like a slow, ancient chant. Then, one of the younger members of the family, an imposing man with jet-black hair and dark, shimmering skin, rose from his seat and approached the center of the courtyard. His golden eyes gleamed with quiet authority. Let the trial begin, he declared, his voice resonating with power. Liam's heart thudded in his chest as the air seemed to thicken, the very fabric of the courtyard vibrating with the weight of the moment. He was no longer just an earthling on a date. He was a challenger, a man who had to prove his worth to a civilization that was older than humanity itself. The young man, who had not yet introduced himself, gestured for Liam to follow. Without a word, Mara stood as well, her presence beside him a silent reassurance. As they walked toward the edge of the courtyard, Liam noticed that the ground beneath them had begun to shift. The smooth, bioluminescent stones seemed to hum with energy as the landscape transformed before his eyes. I hope you're ready, the young man said, his voice laced with an unreadable emotion. The trial begins now. Without warning, the earth beneath them cracked open, and a massive structure rose from the ground. It was a series of towering platforms, each one suspended in midair by invisible forces, and they seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. Liam's stomach churned as he realized what was happening. This was not going to be a simple test. This was something far beyond anything he could have prepared for. These are the heights of Caliph, the young man explained, his gaze steady. You must ascend them, reach the highest platform, and retrieve the artifact that rests there. The heights are alive, they will challenge you in ways you cannot imagine. Only those who are truly worthy of Kalitha's legacy can pass. Liam swallowed hard. The platforms floated high above them, and he could feel the weight of their power, the unspoken promise of something ancient. The heights were not just physical obstacles, they were living, sentient. They could sense his fears, his weaknesses. What happens if I fail? Liam asked, trying to steady his breath. The young man met his gaze. You will fall. The heights will not tolerate weakness. But if you succeed, the artifact will reveal your true nature. It will show whether you are capable of standing by Mara's side. Mara's gaze was soft, almost sympathetic. She didn't say anything, but Liam could see the concern in her eyes. She had faith in him, but even she knew how difficult this would be. The heights were a part of her people's legacy, a challenge that only the strongest had passed. She wasn't sure what would happen if Liam couldn't make it. Stay focused, Mara whispered, her voice low and steady. You've got this. Liam nodded, trying to steel himself for what was to come. The young man motioned toward the first platform, a floating disk of translucent material that hovered just above the ground. Liam stepped forward cautiously, then hesitated, his foot hovering above the platform. The surface shimmered like water, rippling with energy, and he could feel the weight of the trial pressing down on him. Before he could take a step, a voice rang out from the surrounding crowd. "Remember," Shara called, her voice cutting through the air. "This trial is not just about strength. It is about understanding. The heights will test you not only physically but mentally. You must remain calm and centered. Only then will you succeed." Liam took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. As soon as his foot made contact, the disc shot upward, carrying him high into the air. The wind whipped around him as he ascended, his heart racing. The platform moved steadily, but the higher it climbed, the more disorienting the view became. Below him, the courtyard seemed impossibly small, and the distant horizon stretched into infinity. At the top of the first platform, Liam was confronted with the first challenge. A wall of shimmering light appeared before him, solid and impenetrable. It radiated an intense energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He could sense that it was not just a barrier, it was alive, responsive to his presence. It felt like it was waiting for him to make a move. Liam's mind raced. How was he supposed to get through this? He could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of Mara's family watching from below. His hand trembled as he reached out toward the glowing wall, his fingers just inches from it. As soon as his hand made contact, the light surged, and a voice, disembodied but clear, echoed through his mind. "What do you seek, Earthling?" Liam's heart pounded. The question was simple, yet it carried immense weight. What did he seek? His first instinct was to respond with the truth, but something told him this wasn't just about words. It was about understanding. What was the true nature of his journey? What was the deeper truth he needed to grasp? He glanced down at Mara, her face a mix of concern and hope, and then he understood. "I seek to prove that I am worthy of her," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I seek to stand by her side, to be more than just a visitor in her world. I seek to be her equal." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Liam thought he had failed. But then, the wall before him shimmered and dissipated, opening a path forward. The first test had been passed. Liam exhaled shakily, his heart still racing, but he didn't have time to celebrate. The next platform was already rising before him, and with it came the next challenge. As the next platform moved closer, he realized this trial would not be won through brute force alone. It would require more than just physical endurance. It would require wisdom, patience, and, most of all, a willingness to understand the essence of his bond with Mara. The journey was just beginning. Liam's feet barely touched the next platform before he was assaulted with a wave of disorienting sensations. The air around him felt thick, almost tangible, as though the very atmosphere was charged with energy. The platform beneath him shifted, and the ground before him rippled with an unseen force. This time, the challenge wasn't physical. He could sense it in the air. This was a mental trial, one that would demand every ounce of his focus and self-control. He steadied himself, trying to gather his thoughts, but the overwhelming sensation of being observed by Mara's family made it hard to concentrate. A voice, soft yet penetrating, echoed in his mind. "Do you understand the weight of your connection to Mara?" Liam froze. It was not a question he had prepared for. He had always known he loved Mara, but the deeper meaning of that love, the responsibilities and complexities that came with it, were still so foreign to him. He had barely begun to scratch the surface of understanding her world, her legacy, and the cosmic bond that tied her to the universe. The platform shimmered again, and suddenly, memories of his time with Mara began to flash before his eyes. He saw their first meeting, her radiant smile as she walked into the coffee shop, how she had made him feel as though nothing else in the world mattered. He remembered their quiet moments together, the way she had comforted him after a particularly rough day, her presence like a calm anchor in the chaos of his life. But then, the memories shifted. He saw her with others, family members, friends, people who had known her for much longer than he had. He saw how they revered her, how they spoke of her in tones filled with awe and respect. Mara was not just a woman, she was something much more, a being whose destiny was written in the stars, whose actions rippled across the fabric of time itself. The weight of it all crashed over him. This wasn't just about loving her. This was about understanding her, truly understanding who she was, the immense responsibility she carried, and what it meant to be with someone like her. Another voice, a whisper this time, joined the first. If you truly love her, you will understand the consequences of your actions. This is not just a bond between two people. This is a bond between worlds. Liam's chest tightened as he realized the full scope of the trial. This was no longer just about him proving his worth. This was about him proving that he could comprehend the enormity of what Mara's existence meant, not just for him, but for the entire universe. He had to show that he understood the weight of being with someone like her, someone who was part of something far greater than himself. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. His mind was overwhelmed, but he knew that the only way through this was to focus on the truth of what he felt for Mara, the depth of their connection, and the promise he had made to her. I understand, he whispered aloud, though he wasn't entirely sure he did. I understand that Mara is not just a woman. She is part of something bigger than both of us. But my love for her is real. I will stand by her side, not just because of who she is, but because of who we are together. The platform beneath him trembled, and for a moment, it seemed as though the entire trial would collapse. But then, the shimmer of energy around him faded, and the voice in his mind quieted. You are beginning to understand, the voice intoned, fading into the distance. The platform shifted once more, rising higher into the air. Liam exhaled a sigh of relief, but the calm was fleeting. The next phase of the trial was upon him. As the platform ascended, Liam's thoughts began to drift back to Mara. Was he really ready for the weight of what he was facing? Could he truly stand beside her, understanding all that she carried? He wasn't sure if he could fully comprehend the magnitude of her world, but one thing was certain, he loved her. And if that was enough to make him worthy, then he would do whatever it took to prove it. The next platform loomed ahead, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just an obstacle. This time, the trial would test his very soul. The platform stopped moving, and Liam found himself at the edge of a vast chasm. The air was cold, and a gust of wind sent chills down his spine. The chasm stretched out endlessly before him, its depths hidden by shadows, and across it was another platform, even higher than the one he stood on. But the distance between the two platforms was far too great to simply leap across. The gap was wide, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see a way across. A low hum filled the air, and suddenly, a shimmering bridge appeared before him, an ethereal pathway that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. It was beautiful, glowing with a soft, pale light, and it stretched out across the chasm toward the distant platform. But there was something strange about it. The bridge was not solid. It seemed to flicker and warp, as if it could vanish at any moment. Liam stepped closer to the edge of the chasm, looking down at the swirling darkness below. He had to cross. There was no other way forward. But the bridge was unstable. Every step he took would bring him closer to the unknown. The voice in his mind spoke again, softer this time. The path is not always clear, Earthling. Sometimes, you must take a step into the unknown. Liam hesitated. The bridge was a risk. He could fall. He could fail. But he knew that taking no action would only guarantee his defeat. With a deep breath, he stepped onto the shimmering bridge. The moment his foot made contact, the surface rippled beneath him, and the bridge seemed to flicker in and out of existence. For a moment, Liam thought he might fall, but his resolve hardened. He wasn't going to let fear stop him. Step by step, he moved forward, the bridge pulsing with energy beneath his feet. It felt as though the very fabric of the universe was watching him, waiting for him to make the next move. His heart raced, but he kept his focus on the goal ahead. He could feel the eyes of Mara's family upon him, and he wasn't going to fail them. Not now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached the other platform. It was solid beneath his feet, and the shimmering bridge faded away, leaving him standing on the edge of a new challenge. Liam breathed a sigh of relief, but the true test was still ahead. The artifact. He had to find it. He had to prove that he was worthy of Mara's world. The new platform beneath Liam felt different, solid, yet pulsing with an unspoken power that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. The shimmering bridge had disappeared behind him, leaving only the vast chasm and the space between him and Mara's family. His breath was heavy from the climb, but his heart beat with renewed purpose. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. The artifact was close, but so was the final challenge. The platform was vast, stretching out in all directions, but at its center, there was something he could feel, like a magnetic pull drawing him toward it. It was a large, ornate pedestal, glowing faintly with a blue light that seemed to pulse with life. On it rested a crystal, a perfect, glowing orb that radiated an energy Liam could almost taste. He instinctively knew that this was the artifact he had come for, the object that would prove his worth, or reveal his failure. As he approached, the air grew heavier, and his mind seemed to swirl with thoughts that were not his own. Visions flashed in front of him, images of Mara, of the bond they shared, of her family and her people, stretching back through generations. The images blurred, shifting and twisting in a kaleidoscope of light, until the visions became overwhelming. Suddenly, a sharp, clear voice cut through the confusion. "What will you sacrifice to claim the artifact?" The question echoed through the air, resonating with the weight of 100 lifetimes. Liam froze. The artifact was within his reach, yet the challenge before him was not simply about physical endurance or intellect. This was a test of something far deeper, something more personal. His mind raced. What was he willing to sacrifice for Mara? For this love, this connection that had grown between them in such a short time. He had already risked so much, his comfort, his understanding of his own place in the universe. But sacrifice went beyond that. He had to give something of himself that could not be returned. Something irreplaceable. The voice came again, its tone sharp and commanding. Will you give up your past, your ties to your world? Will you give up the life you knew to walk in the shadow of our stars? Liam's heart clenched. The voice was not just asking about physical sacrifice, it was asking about everything. His world. His future. His identity. Could he truly leave it all behind? Could he live in a universe where everything he knew was a fraction of the scope of Mara's people? Where the weight of their history, their legacy, was far greater than anything humanity had ever experienced? Liam closed his eyes, trying to center himself. His mind wandered back to Earth, the friends he had left behind, the family he had yet to fully connect with, the life he had known. He was an Earthling. A human, with a short history compared to the vast, endless stretches of time that Mara's family had lived through. Could he walk away from everything, to become something else? Someone who stood beside Mara not just in love, but in spirit, sharing in the cosmos that had shaped her existence. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like an immovable force, but the answer came with clarity. Yes. If he truly loved Mara, if he was truly worthy of standing beside her, then he would make the sacrifice. It wasn't just a physical journey, it was a spiritual one. A willingness to step into the unknown, to embrace a life that was beyond the limited scope of what he had once thought possible. His hand reached out, hovering just above the glowing orb. The moment his skin brushed against the surface, a wave of energy surged through him, rushing into his very soul. For a brief second, it felt as though the universe itself opened up before him, a flood of knowledge, history, and wisdom from the farthest reaches of the cosmos. His senses expanded, and for a moment, he could feel Mara's presence in every fiber of his being. The light, the stars, the endless night, they were all a part of her, and now they were a part of him. But as the light faded, so did the overwhelming rush of power. Liam staggered back, breathing heavily, and as the world around him stabilized, he found himself standing alone on the platform once again. The artifact had vanished, and in its place was a soft, golden glow, like the promise of something new. A voice filled the air, calm and serene. "You have made your choice, Earthling. You have proven yourself worthy." Liam's chest tightened, but this time, the feeling wasn't one of fear. It was a feeling of completion, of finally understanding the depth of the trial. He had stepped into the unknown, embraced the sacrifice, and claimed his place in Mara's world. Before he could catch his breath, Mara appeared beside him. Her presence was like a beacon of light, a warmth that soothed the lingering echoes of the trial's intensity. "Did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her golden eyes searched his face, searching for any sign of doubt. But all Liam could do was smile, the weight of the trial lifting off his shoulders. "I did," he said, his voice steady. "I understand now. I understand what it means to be with you. To be part of your world, your legacy." Mara's eyes softened, and she reached out to take his hand. "I never doubted you," she said, her voice filled with the quiet confidence that had always defined her. "But this was something you had to understand for yourself." Liam nodded, feeling the truth of her words. There was no shortcut to understanding, no easy path to navigating the complexities of love when the stakes were this high. But in that moment, he knew that he was ready. He was ready to stand beside Mara, to face whatever challenges lay ahead, and to embrace the vastness of the universe alongside her. The ground beneath them shifted, and a soft glow spread out from the platform, reaching into the sky like the first rays of dawn. The trial was over, but the journey was far from finished. And as Liam stood beside Mara, he knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but it would also be filled with unimaginable wonder. "Where do we go from here?" Liam asked, his voice filled with a new sense of purpose. Mara smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the stars above. "We go forward," she said simply. "Together." And with that, the universe seemed to open up before them, a vast, infinite horizon, waiting to be explored. The platform beneath Liam and Mara continued to hum with a quiet energy, its surface shimmering faintly as if it was alive with purpose. Despite the intensity of the trial they had just faced, the weight of the universe seemed to shift with each passing second, leaving both of them suspended between what was and what could be. The calm that had washed over Liam in the aftermath of the trial didn't last long. The realization hit him like a wave: though he had completed the trial of kinship, he had only just begun to truly understand the depths of his bond with Mara. There were still so many things he didn't know about her world, about the intricacies of her family's power, and about the future they were both stepping into. Mara, sensing the shift in his thoughts, squeezed his hand tighter. "We've done it, Liam. You've proven yourself. You are no longer an outsider." Liam turned to her, his gaze searching for any sign of doubt in her eyes. There was none. Only the quiet assurance he had come to rely on in the past months. But even as he met her steady gaze, a quiet worry tugged at the back of his mind. "What's next?" Liam asked, his voice almost uncertain, despite the confidence he had just displayed. "What now that I've passed? What happens to us?" Mara's expression softened, a warm smile tugging at her lips. "Now comes the hardest part." Liam blinked in surprise. "The hardest part?" She nodded, her golden eyes reflective as she looked out into the horizon. "The trial showed that you have the strength to stand by me. But our journey is just beginning. What you have to understand now is not just the power we share, but the forces that seek to control that power." Liam furrowed his brow, a knot forming in his stomach. "What do you mean? What forces?" Mara's gaze darkened as she took a step back, placing a gentle hand on the pedestal where the artifact had once rested. "The artifact you claimed is not just a token of passage. It is a symbol, one that has been sought by others for millennia. There are those who wish to control my family's legacy, who will stop at nothing to take it from you. From us. Liam's heart skipped a beat. He had barely come to grips with the overwhelming responsibility of being with Mara, and now, he was being thrust into the perilous depths of a cosmic struggle. So, the trial wasn't just about proving myself to your family, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mara shook her head. It was also a test of the future. A test of our ability to face the forces that will come for us. We cannot hide from this, Liam. Once you claim the artifact, the universe notices. It has a way of revealing itself when the balance is disrupted. Liam swallowed hard. The weight of her words settled over him, and for the first time, he felt the sharp sting of fear. He had thought that the trial was the hardest part, the culmination of everything he had worked toward. But now, he understood that the real test lay ahead. They were standing on the precipice of something vast and unknown, a battle between forces that neither of them fully understood. Before he could respond, a voice broke through the tension, calling from the edge of the platform. A figure stepped forward, a familiar face, but one that Liam hadn't expected to see here. It was Shara. Her presence was commanding, her figure tall and graceful, yet there was an underlying tension in her stance, a quiet readiness that Liam recognized all too well. Shara had been the one who had spoken of the trial of kinship, the one who had warned him of its dangers. But now, there was something different in her eyes. I see you've completed the trial, she said, her voice calm but laced with a certain gravity. But that doesn't mean you are free of the consequences. Liam turned to her, trying to read her expression. What do you mean? Shara stepped closer, her gaze flicking to Mara before returning to Liam. The artifact is just the beginning. There are ancient factions in the galaxy who covet what it represents. And there are those within your own species who have begun to notice the shift. The power you've gained, the power you now share with Mara, will not go unnoticed. Liam's thoughts raced. Factions. And, others from Earth? Shara nodded. Yes. Those who seek to manipulate power, control it, or destroy it. They have their eyes on the artifact now. They will stop at nothing to either take it from you or use it for their own purposes. Mara turned to Liam, her face set in determination. You're not just carrying the weight of my family's legacy now. You are carrying the responsibility of protecting it. The artifact is not a symbol for just us, it is a beacon. A warning. It's already attracting attention, and not all of it is good. Liam's mind spun with the implications. He hadn't signed up for any of this. He had thought that by proving his worth in the trial of kinship, he would earn a place by Mara's side, a place where they could face the world together. But now, it seemed as though he was thrust into a cosmic game of power and manipulation, a game where stakes far greater than his love for Mara were at play. I don't understand, Liam said, his voice a mix of frustration and confusion. Why didn't you tell me all of this earlier? Why didn't you warn me about the dangers? Mara stepped closer, her golden eyes soft but firm. I couldn't. Not until you were ready. The trial was not just for you to prove your worth. It was to show me, and your family, that you had the strength to protect us. To understand the magnitude of what we are up against. Shara added, her voice low but urgent, now that you've claimed the artifact, your journey has just begun. You are not just an outsider anymore. You are a target. Liam felt the weight of those words settle on his chest like a stone. His life, which had once seemed so ordinary, was now irrevocably changed. He had crossed a threshold that could never be undone. The artifact was his, but with it came dangers he hadn't fully anticipated. What do we do now? He asked, his voice steady despite the swirling anxiety within him. Shara's gaze was sharp, her eyes narrowing with a steely resolve. We prepare. You prepare. For what comes next, Liam. And know this, there is no turning back now. Mara, standing by his side, reached out to squeeze his hand. But you are not alone. We face this together. As we always have. Liam turned to her, his resolve hardening. He had never expected his life to take this turn, to be drawn into the depths of a cosmic struggle. But as he stood beside Mara, he understood one thing clearly: no matter what forces sought to tear them apart, he would face them. Not just for himself, but for the woman he loved, and for the legacy they had now both become a part of. The universe had shifted, and now, he was part of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. And together, he and Mara would face whatever came next. The calm that had once settled over Liam seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a growing unease. As Mara and Shara continued to speak about the impending dangers, his mind raced with thoughts of the artifact and the heavy responsibility he had inherited. The galaxy, it seemed, was far more complicated and dangerous than he had ever imagined. Mara squeezed his hand again, a gesture of reassurance, but even she couldn't hide the tension in her eyes. "We must move quickly, Liam," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "The longer we stay here, the more vulnerable we become. Those who seek the artifact won't wait forever." Liam nodded, though his thoughts were still trying to catch up with the new reality he found himself in. "Who exactly are we dealing with here?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with confusion. "What kind of people?" He paused, trying to find the right word. "Factions are after the artifact." Shara's face darkened as she spoke, her voice low but filled with a simmering intensity. "The worst kind. They are not just power-hungry factions, they are organizations with influence, wealth, and armies. Some are ancient groups who have been searching for the artifact for millennia, believing that it holds the key to ultimate power. Others are more recent, but just as dangerous, groups who believe that your connection to Mara and the artifact itself threatens their grip on the universe." Liam felt the weight of her words press down on him. He had thought he was simply proving his worth to Mara's family, but now, it seemed like he was caught in the crossfire of a battle he never expected. His hand clenched around Mara's, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. "You're telling me that people want this artifact because they think it holds the power to control the universe?" he asked, the words sounding absurd in his own mind, but the truth was undeniable. He could feel it, the overwhelming pull of the artifact that still lingered in his senses. It was no ordinary object, it was something more, something ancient and powerful. And now, it was his responsibility to protect it. "Yes," Mara said, her voice sharp. "But it's not just the artifact they want. It's the connection we share. The artifact is a symbol of our family's legacy, but it's also a doorway to powers beyond anyone's comprehension. And those who control the artifact will have access to things that could change the balance of the entire galaxy." Liam took a deep breath, trying to wrap his mind around the implications of her words. Everything he had known about the world had been turned upside down in the span of a few days. His relationship with Mara had opened doors to an entirely new reality, but it had also exposed him to dangers he wasn't ready for. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Liam admitted, the vulnerability in his voice betraying his confidence from earlier. "I'm just a regular guy from Earth. This," he gestured to the surroundings, to the vast, star-filled sky, the platform beneath them, and the looming uncertainty, "this is too big for me. How can I protect something like this when I barely understand it?" Mara's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "You're more than you realize, Liam. You may come from a world that is small in comparison to ours, but you have something that the others don't, something they can never take from you." Liam met her gaze, searching for the reassurance she was offering, but her words didn't seem to fully sink in. He was still struggling to make sense of the galaxy he had just entered, and the stakes were higher than he ever could have imagined. He couldn't just be a bystander, he had to act, to protect what was his now, to protect Mara and the legacy of her family. As if sensing his growing anxiety, Mara continued. "We'll train, we'll prepare. But more importantly, you need to trust in your instincts. You've already proven that you have the heart to stand beside me." Now, we need to make sure you have the strength to survive what comes next. Liam nodded slowly. He had trusted his instincts before, when he had met Mara, when he had faced the trials. But this was different. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about protecting something bigger than himself. Something that could reshape the future. "We need to go," Shara interjected, her tone sharp. "We've lingered too long. The first wave of forces will be coming soon. We don't have much time." Liam turned to look at her. "What do you mean, first wave?" he asked, his stomach tightening. "You're telling me they're already here?" Shara didn't answer directly. Instead, she turned on her heel and walked toward a ship that had appeared on the horizon, its sleek design glowing faintly against the dark backdrop of space. "We need to leave the planet before they can track us. I've already set the coordinates for a safe location, but it won't stay that way for long." Mara squeezed Liam's hand once more before nodding to Shara. "We can talk about what's ahead once we're out of immediate danger. Right now, we need to move." Liam didn't hesitate. He knew there was no time for questions, no time for second-guessing. This was the reality now, his life was no longer ordinary. The universe had just become far more dangerous, and he was at the center of it. The trio boarded the ship, and it lifted off the platform with a smooth, almost imperceptible motion. As the ship soared into the inky blackness of space, Liam glanced back at the planet below. It seemed so peaceful from up here, yet he knew that the calm was a lie. Beneath the surface, something dark was stirring, and it was coming for them. Shara set the ship on a steady course, and the hum of the engine seemed to lull Liam into a strange, tense calm. As the ship rocketed through the stars, he couldn't help but wonder how far this would all go. How long could they stay ahead of the forces chasing them? How could he protect Mara, when he didn't even fully understand what was happening? He turned to her, watching her as she stared out the viewport, her face serious but composed. She was the one who had been born into this life, the one who understood what was at stake. And yet, she was still with him, by his side, despite everything. Liam took a deep breath, trying to push his doubts away. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: no matter how dangerous it got, he would face it all with Mara by his side. Together, they could survive whatever was coming. Together, they could protect the artifact, and each other. The stars stretched out before them, an infinite sea of possibilities. But in that moment, the only thing Liam was certain of was that the true battle was just beginning. The ship cut through the vast expanse of space, its engines humming in perfect harmony with the silence of the stars. Liam sat beside Mara, his fingers intertwined with hers, both of them looking out through the viewport. The ship's speed was exhilarating, but it couldn't fully erase the tension that had settled over them. The looming threat of the factions chasing them was never far from their minds. "How much longer until we're at the safe location?" Liam asked, breaking the silence, his voice laced with apprehension. Mara's expression remained calm, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "We should be there within the hour." "But it's not the distance that concerns me," she replied, her voice quiet. "It's the storm that's building behind us." Liam understood the weight of her words. The factions were closing in, and Mara's family's legacy, no, their legacy, was what everyone wanted. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore, he was fighting for the woman he loved, for their future together, and for the universe that had become a battleground. Shara, who had been at the helm, turned around, her gaze hard and focused. "There's no such thing as a safe location anymore. The factions know the artifact is in play, and they will stop at nothing to take it. Our only hope is to stay ahead of them, outpace them long enough to get to the place where we can make a stand." Liam turned to her, his anxiety creeping back. "What place? Where exactly are we going?" Shara's lips curled into a grim smile. "Somewhere they can't touch us. But we have to get there fast. The longer we wait, the more likely it is that they'll find us." Mara looked at Liam, her eyes searching his face. The artifact is more than just a key to power, Liam. It's a part of our bloodline. Whoever controls it, controls the future. Liam felt the full weight of the responsibility crashing down on him again. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted, his voice strained. What if I fail? You won't, Mara said firmly. You've already proven you can stand beside me. Now, it's time to prove you can stand for us. Before Liam could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them all off balance. The walls seemed to tremble, and the lights flickered. The sound of something heavy scraping against the hull echoed through the craft. We've been hit. Shara shouted, quickly making adjustments at the control panel. Someone's already found us. Mara and Liam exchanged a look, determination mixed with fear. This was it. The moment they had been dreading had finally arrived. The factions were here, and they were closing in fast. We need to fight back, Liam said, standing up, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what he could do, but he wasn't going to sit idly by while Mara was in danger. Mara stood beside him, her posture strong, but there was a coldness in her eyes. We will, she said, her voice unwavering. But we have to survive the first wave. Shara's hands flew over the controls, her eyes scanning the readouts. They've attached boarding devices. They'll be here any moment. Liam's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced for options. There was no place to run now. The ship was their only refuge, and it was under siege. I've got something we can use, Shara said, her voice steady as she turned to the others. There are weapons on board. Not enough for a full-scale assault, but enough to make a stand. Mara nodded without hesitation. We'll fight them off. We're not giving up this artifact, not today. The tension in the air was palpable. Liam's pulse raced as he followed Mara and Shara to the back of the ship, where hidden compartments were revealed. They were filled with weapons, advanced energy pistols, plasma rifles, and shields. It was like a different world, one he had never imagined could exist. But this was the reality now. This was the life he had chosen by standing beside Mara. Liam picked up a weapon, his hands shaking as he tested its weight. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't trained for this. But he had learned to trust Mara, and now, he had to trust himself. We'll hold them off as long as we can, Mara said, her voice calm but with a fire that Liam had come to admire. She checked the plasma rifle she had chosen and turned to him. Stay close to me. Before Liam could reply, the ship lurched again, this time more violently, and the sound of metal tearing filled the air. Shara cursed under her breath, and the lights flickered one last time before the ship's emergency lights kicked on. We're boarding. Shara shouted. Prepare yourselves. The door to the ship's airlock blasted open, and armed soldiers in dark, reflective armor stormed into the room. Their presence was imposing, their movements precise. They had come for one thing, control of the artifact, and they would do whatever it took to take it. Liam's heart raced as he aimed his weapon at the intruders, but before he could fire, Mara was already moving. Her speed and agility were breathtaking as she leapt into action, firing energy blasts at the invaders with pinpoint accuracy. The soldiers dropped like flies, but more were coming. For every one that fell, two more took their place. Liam's breath caught in his throat as he saw Mara in action, a warrior, a protector. He fired his weapon, the pulse of energy barely grazing the nearest invader, but it was enough to slow them down. The invaders took cover behind the ship's structures, returning fire, but they were outmatched. Mara was a force of nature, her every move calculating, controlled, her power and precision an extension of herself. Liam! Mara shouted over the chaos. We need to get to the control room. That's where the real fight is going to be. Without thinking, Liam nodded, his body moving on its own. He stayed close to her, covering her as they made their way through the ship. The sound of plasma fire echoed in the tight corridors, the flashes of light illuminating the chaos that had engulfed them. When they reached the control room, they found it occupied, 2 more soldiers, their weapons trained on the ship's core systems. Without hesitation, Mara acted. She hurled a plasma grenade toward the soldiers, the explosion throwing them off their feet. She didn't pause for a moment as she rushed forward, taking the soldiers out with expert precision. Liam's pulse was racing, his breath short as he aimed his weapon once again, trying to hold the line, but it was clear that Mara and Shara were the true experts here. They had the skills, the experience, and the power that Liam had yet to fully tap into. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the invaders fell, their bodies sprawled across the ship's cold metal floor. The control room fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the 3 survivors. Liam turned to Mara, who was wiping the sweat from her brow, her golden eyes glowing with intensity. "Is it over?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "For now," Mara said, her voice low and steady. "But the factions will come again. And next time, they won't be as easy to fight off." Liam nodded, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain, no matter what came, they would face it together. As long as they had each other, they could withstand anything. The ship moved onward, into the unknown, their destination uncertain, but their resolve unshakable. The universe was vast, and its dangers endless. But as long as Liam and Mara stood side by side, they would face it all, united, unbroken, and ready for whatever came next. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon, so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.